It's the first week of October, and Sheila Washburn has spent the last hour at work poring over blogs and articles, trying to find out what's wrong with her son and how she can help him. It started on a weeknight just a few weeks into the school year. It was 2 a.m., and Sheila was having trouble sleeping, as she sometimes does. And on her way to grab some cereal, she noticed that the light was on in David's room, which was unusual. David was not a night person. He rarely was awake after 10 p.m., and so she opened his door a crack and saw him just staring at his computer, not even typing, just staring. He startled when he noticed her. "Mom, what are you doing?" "I'm just checking to see if you're okay. Why are you up so late?" "It's not a big deal, Mom. I just have this paper. I'm almost done." "It's okay. Just make sure you get to sleep soon." "Okay, Mom. Love you." Now, Sheila trusted David, and she knew school was important to him. But something about the look on his face told her that something was wrong. He looked tired, but mostly he looked scared, like this panicked look when you know something bad is going to happen, but you just don't know how to stop it. And the next morning, Sheila had to wake him when he slept through his alarm. He told her that he felt really sick and that there was no way he could go to school. And could he please just stay in bed? Something told her that he was lying. He was probably just tired and wanted to sleep more. But again, David was a trustworthy kid. She thought this was just a one-time thing. He'd get things in order and everything would be fine. But as the weeks went by, Sheila started to realize things weren't fine. She'd regularly notice that David was awake in the middle of the night, and she started having trouble sleeping herself out of worry for him. Her typically happy, upbeat son had become withdrawn, talking in monosyllables, avoiding eye contact, and just being irritable. But what told her that things were really bad were his grades. Now, David had always been a great student. He'd always gotten straight A's. And if he got an A-, he'd be upset. And he was really proud of his grades. I mean, he talked about school a lot. It had always been a big deal to him. And Sheila didn't even usually check his grades on a regular basis. She hadn't needed to. It made her feel like a helicopter mom once he got into high school. So when she finally did check in late September, she was shocked. He had a couple of B's, mostly C's, and one D. It was the hard evidence she'd been fearing that finally proved to her that something really was wrong. And it wasn't so much the grades themselves. She'd been a C student, so to her these grades weren't the end of the world. But it was what this huge, sudden shift in grades represented. Something had dramatically changed with her son, and he wasn't talking about it. Again, David had always loved talking about school. He was good at it, and it was clear he liked the praise he got for his success. But even when he'd gotten A- and was disappointed, he'd still talk about it. But this year, he wasn't talking about school. He wasn't talking about much of anything now that she thought about it. She kept asking him if something was wrong, if he wanted to talk about anything, but every time he'd have this just distant reply. "I'm fine, Mom. Don't worry about it, okay?" And really, at the heart of it was this feeling that this was not her son. This was not the chipper boy who would rest his head on her shoulder when they watched TV together. She knew it just wasn't that he was a teenager, and that the problem was more than just grades, or more than sleep. She knew that something was wrong, and she had no idea what to do. And so, back to that October morning, Sheila is losing hope that the internet has her answer. And she Googles the words, "What to do if my son fakes being sick?" Today was the 5th time in the last month that he's lied about being sick. She finds a couple parenting blogs that aren't really that helpful. They have some tips about what to say and things that might help, but they're not calming her deepest fears. What is happening to my son? And what can I do to help? Hi, I'm Corey Bush, and I've worked with countless teens and parents in situations like David's. I was a teacher for 6 years before switching careers to become a therapist. If you're listening right now, you might be a mom or a teacher or just someone who's interested in learning about how our minds work. But no matter who you are, there is something about Sheila's experience that we can all relate to. Someone you care about is having a tough time and you don't know what's happening or how to help. And so a big reason I started this podcast is because there are plenty of blogs and other podcasts out there with tips and tricks and, giving information in a really easy, digestible way. And that's going to help a little, but it's not going to get at the heart of the problem. And there's also plenty of science out there about our brains and even teenage brains that dives in and gives really thorough, solid information. But there are few places that bring a really deep knowledge of why we experience things like depression and anxiety to a story format that's easy to digest and relate to. And so we'll follow David, Sheila, and their family, and we'll look at what's really going on inside David's mind. And before we wrap up, a few notes. All the characters in this show are fictional. They are based on hundreds of families I've worked with over the past decade. And any resemblance to real people is purely coincidental. Also, this show is not therapy or a substitute for therapy. If you need a therapist, Google the word therapist plus your city name. So next time on The Teen Mind, we'll start with Sheila's question, what is happening to my son? We'll take a deep look into David's mind and what causes him to slowly unravel those first few weeks of sophomore year. The Teen Mind is a production of Elements Counseling, Inc. Find more, including full text of each episode and how to get a hold of me at theteenmind.com. Thanks to Paragraphs for the theme music. Find them at paragraphs.bandcamp.com. I do counseling with teens and families in Minneapolis, and I do workshops for parents and teachers throughout the Twin Cities metro area. If you find this show helpful or interesting, please just take a second, maybe think of one parent or teacher who you could share this with. And finally, it would be super helpful if you went to iTunes and just wrote a quick review of the show. Thanks so much for listening.